we looked at prenatal factors, and then we're going to look at postnatal factors. And these are going to primarily take us into the discussion of psychological trauma and severe neglect. Now, to set the stage for this, I want to come back to a concept that we talked about earlier in the class, top-down control. And this is where there's a higher brain structure. And literally, most of the time, it's actually higher up in the brain, okay? But it's really, the term higher means a more evolved part of the brain, exercising control over more primitive brain structures, okay? So let's start off with some research that got this guy the Nobel Prize. Now, this is the Plaisia californius, and it's a marine snail, and it's huge. It's about the size of a basketball, and it's found almost exclusively in Monterey Bay. It's rare to find this outside of the California coast. So we can be proud Californians. You know, we got this famous snail. Okay, and the guy who did the original research on this was Eric Kandel. We'll talk more about him in a moment. But what he did is he chose an animal that, number one, has large nerve cells. Now, go figure this. This animal has the largest nerve cells in the entire animal kingdom. Okay, they're huge, and that makes it easier then to really study them, especially for structural differences that might occur in different kinds of circumstances. Okay, the other thing is you can teach these snails how to do certain things. Well, not real fancy stuff. I mean, they can't, do mathematics or anything like that. But I'm just kind of joking. But habituation is a form of learning, classical conditioning. So let's go back here and take a look at this guy for just a minute. Move the slide back. Camera over there. Okay. Now, here they are, and they're in an aquarium, and so probably Eric Kandel did not do this himself. I'm sure he had graduate students do it. But if you touch the siphon up here, it'll cause a startle response. It's this snail's own fight or flight response, and what it does is it starts flapping its gills. Okay. It turns out that it only has 6 motor neurons. I mean, humans have millions. Okay, it has 6 neurons. And that's their fight or flight response. So what they did in this study is they would periodically touch its siphon, and it wouldn't startle. But after a while, you touch it, and it wouldn't startle. And that's habituation. And basically, that's what this is: learning to ignore neutral stimuli. How does it happen? What is really going on here? I mean, how does a snail really, in a sense, learn that being touched there is not dangerous? Well, Kandel was able to demonstrate that this was due to significant changes in the nervous system. And he got his Nobel Prize because he was able to demonstrate that there was a change in the sensitivity of certain receptors, glutamate receptors. But also, he went on to do additional research that is, in some respects, even more interesting, I think. On this slide, we see it's Eric Kandel and then another researcher named William Greeno, and what they were able to show in studies like this is that within minutes, literally within minutes, there can be a change in the structure of the nervous system, a change in morphology, not just squirting out more neurotransmitter or things like that. It would be very transient, but literally the experience sculpts the nervous system. Okay, and you can see here. Evidence of increased number of synapses developing within 10 minutes. And go back to earlier class, this is almost always because they grow spines, dendritic spines, that make new synapses. In addition to that, increased dendrite branching, increased density, increased spines, and increased synapses. And this is a very, I think, interesting slide here. We see this is a dendrite, okay? And here is a spine. And look at this. In 1/2 hour, there isn't one here yet, but it grows a new spine. And it's between the nerve terminal and spines where you have most of your synapses in the brain. Also, if you happen to be interested in dominance hierarchies in crayfish, and you're going to really like this slide. Okay, the alpha crayfish over here. No kidding. I mean, they have dominance hierarchies in these little kind of lobster-like creatures. And if you look at their motor system, arrow here, their motor system, it uses actually serotonin nerves and serotonin neurotransmitter to activate a fight or flight response, okay? And also to posture. You know, like with monkeys, for instance, a dominant male, you know, will get a certain posture to kind of let everybody know you're submissive to me. And part of what crayfish do to show that they're the alpha male is there's this particular kind of flipping of their tail. And all the other crayfish go, oh yeah, he's top dog here, okay? But what they find is, this is more normal, the same nerve pathway, but in the alpha crayfish, huge amount of additional axons and dendrites. They take this alpha crayfish out of there, throw him away, eat him, I don't know what they do with it, but they take him out of there, and within a week there's a new alpha male that comes up, steps up to the plate, and guess what? This gets transformed into this. There are behavioral changes, there's some kind of social hierarchy perception going on, but it changes the structure of the nervous system. I'll give you another example. This one is very clinically relevant. Okay. Now, this is a circuit. It starts with the orbital frontal area, and it feeds into a brain structure called the caudate nucleus. Then it goes to the thalamus and back to the orbital frontal. Now, here's what happens for every person. If they notice something that is potentially important or maybe even troublesome or dangerous in the environment, this circuit gets activated instantaneously. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm in my office and I look out my window and it looks like somebody's getting into my car. And I go, whoa, wait a minute, what did they do to get in my car? Okay, now when that's happening, behaviorally what's happening is I'm screening stuff out and I am riveted on what's happening and I'm doing threat appraisal, okay? This circuit gets activated. But let's say the truth is it's not my car. It's like my car, but then I remembered, I parked in that other parking lot today. So within a second or two, I do some reality testing, and I go, no, that's not my car. And what happened then is this activation that's going on in the circuit immediately gets shut down. And here's what happens. Here's how it's shut down. Okay, let me show the camera over here again. The moment that I determine that there's no danger, what happens is then two other brain structures and pathways shut down the caudate, the anterior cingulate. I said, remember a little bit earlier, I talked a lot about the cingulate gyrus, and the prefrontal cortex. And what they do is they exercise top-down control on the caudate and close it. The caudate, in a sense, is like a gateway. So let's go back here to this one. This is going back and forth for that few seconds. I'm trying to determine if this is really my car. And then when I find out it's not my car, then it shuts the gate on the caudate. Now, clinically, this is especially relevant for understanding OCD, because people who have obsessive-compulsive disorder do not have effective gating of the caudate nucleus. And that exposure therapy, and much later in the course we'll talk about the neurobiology of psychotherapy, but exposure therapy, which can be very effective in treating OCD, okay, the people that undergo this treatment, up to 80% of them get significantly better. It changes their brain. And the classic study was done in 1988, and they showed before and after PET scans of people. And PET scans of people with OCD, this pathway is lit up like a Christmas tree. And so what happens with them is they may touch a dirty sink or something like that, something that really ignites their fears about dirt, contamination, germs, and so forth. About 2/3 of people with OCD have those kind of worries and fears. And even though there's good reality testing, they know this is ridiculous. I'm not going to die because I touch a dirty sink. By definition, OCD people have good reality testing, but they can't shut down what really starts to become this intensely escalating sense of anxiety, which then leads them to go do a ritual like maybe wash my hands for the next 2 hours. And what you'll see is on pre-treatment, and these are people that are going to be getting psychotherapy, exposure-based cognitive therapy, you activate this and it just continues to be activated. And really every single person has OCD, and the 80% of people that have significant changes, and it usually takes about 20 weeks to get there, they expose them to the same stimulus 20 weeks later, and it shuts down the caudate. And in fact, here is a different perspective on this. The right, it's actually on the left side here, but fact, it's in the right hemisphere. The right caudate, let me see if I can get my arrow over there, is hypermetabolic. It's just lit up like a Christmas tree. And after successful therapy, it's significantly shut down. So this is not again just changing the chemistry of the brain, but it's actually, in a real sense, and bear with me on this because I'll provide some information I think really supports this. There's something about exposure therapy that literally strengthens these inhibitory higher brain areas like the anterior cingulate and the prefrontal cortex. And we're going to get into a lot more detail about this later, but it's not just a transient chemical change, it's an actual change in brain structure.